Hello everyone and welcome back to the YellowDog 3D Tips blog. Today I'm going to be showing you how we can make this bubbling water animation using RealFlow. It's actually quite a simple effect to make, believe it or not. There are a few tutorials online at the moment, but they're all a bit complicated, so I'm going to try and make this as simple as possible. So with a blank scene open in RealFlow, we're going to create a vase piece of geometry, and I'm just going to move it just above the grid and scale it up a little bit. The piece of geometry can be anything you want. In this case I'm just going to use a vase. Then once we've done that, we're going to go up to liquid particles and create a fill object, and in the fill object no parameters, we're going to change the fill object to the vase. And then under the fill volume, we're just going to put that to yes, and you'll see that the vase now fills with particles. And the only parameter we're going to change here is the surface tension, and we're going to change that from the default 1 and put it to 3. And once we've done that, we can now create the gravity in the scene. So just creating a gravity daemon, and I'm just going to rename that to gravity normal, and this will become apparent why I've done this shortly. And now, if we go down to the relationship editor, we need to make it so that the gravity and the vase are not global parameters. They need to be exclusive to the fill object. So to do that, we can right-click these connections from the vase to the hub, which is our global parameter, and we can just remove these connections. So remove them from the vase and the gravity, and if you press Command and drag onto the fill object, we can now connect them and make them exclusive to the fill object, so they won't affect anything else in the scene but the fill object, which is exactly what we want for this kind of scene. So then if we hit simulate, you'll see all the particles start to drop into the vase object, and now we just need all the particles to settle to a flat level, so I'm going to pause the video until that happens. So here we are, all the particles seem to have come to a nice settling point here, so it's kind of level. And what we need to do is make this the initial state of the fill object. So if we go to initial state and click yes and click make initial state, and then if we go down to the reset and make sure reset to initial state is ticked, we can now click reset. And this is now our starting point for the fluid particles inside of the fill object, which is exactly what we need. So next we just need to make a circle emitter, and these circle emitters are going to be our bubble particles. So straight away we need to set these up. So I'm going to change the surface tension of these to around 400. You can play with this value, it's not set in stone. I'm going to change the density to 5000, so they're a lot more dense than the liquid in the fill emitter. And I'm just going to scale this down quite a lot, so it's just really quite small. And I'm going to disable the simulation on the fill object just for now, so we can focus on the circle emitter we just created. And what we need to do now is make the circle emitter emit bursts of particles, and we can do that with the speed attribute. So I'm going to set keyframes here. So on frame 0, I'm going to set a speed value of 0, and I'm going to move across a frame using the arrow key and move this value to 2, and then set another keyframe, and then I'm going to move across 4 frames. So I'm now at frame 5, and I'm going to set the value of the speed to 2 and add another key. I'm going to move across one more key and put this down to 0 again and add a key. And then I'm going to move across to, let's say, frame 12 and then set another keyframe of 0. And I'm adding that so that there's a bit of space between the bursts. And I'm going to right click the speed and click open curve. I'm going to go to key, last node behavior, and click loop. And now we've got this looping on and off animation of the speed. So if I hit simulate now, you'll see what's happening. It's just going to emit bursts of particles. Obviously they're going the wrong way now, but we are going to take care of that. So the next thing we're going to do is select the circle emitter and just rotate it 180 degrees so that it's facing upwards. And once we've got that, we're going to scale it down and just sort of position it kind of randomly. And this is basically going to be where a bubble is emitted from, so just try and keep that in mind. So we're going to start to duplicate these and position them where we want the bubbles to be emitted from. So I'm going to scale it even further, because obviously you want the bubbles to hit the bottom of the volume at different times. You don't want them all to go at the same time. So if you move them at different heights, that's going to happen. So I'm just duplicating them and scaling them in all different directions to make them look a little bit more organic. You can add as many as you want. I think I'm just going to add a few for demonstration purposes. I'm not going to go crazy. So this is looking quite good now. I've got quite a few different emitters here. I'm going to make one sort of big emitter as a sort of big bubble that's going to come in there. So I'm quite happy with that. They're all going to work just fine. So the next thing we need to do is go to geometry and create a null object, and this is going to drive the rotation of all of these circles. So if we select all the circles and go to parent to and select our null, that's going to parent it to the null, and now we can move them all as one. So what we're going to do is keyframe the Y rotation of this null to rotate over the duration of our simulation. So I'm going to go to frame 200 and change this Y rotation to 1080. just so that it rotates at quite a good speed. So I'm just going to keyframe that there. And the next thing we need to do is apply inverse gravity to all these circle emitters. So to do that, we're going to go to daemons up at the top, and we're just going to add in a gravity daemon. Actually, before we do that, I'm just going to neaten up our relationship editor. So I'll just make this a little bit bigger so you can see what's going on. So all of the things that are related to the vase and the fill object, I'm just going to move out of the way, and I'm just going to neaten up all of these circles and just move them to one side. And now we can drop in our gravity daemon, and I'm going to rename this to gravity reverse, just so that it's more clear in the relationship editor. And now if we go to the strength, I'm going to put this to -9.8 so that the bubbles flow upwards. So if we go back into our relationship editor, we can now see our reverse gravity daemon, and I'm just going to remove the connection to the global hub, and I'm just going to command click and drag this onto all of the circles, so this gravity is only affecting the circle emitter. And I'll just enlarge the viewport so we can see what's happening more clearly. And I'm going to go to the simulation tab of the fill object and make it active again. So all of the water particles in the vase are now active. I'm going to hit reset and go back to our initial state that we set up earlier. And now if I hit simulate, you'll get a little peek of what's happening. So all of the circles are now rotating around this central null, and they're all just going to emit this sort of burst of particles, and this burst of particles is going to go through the volume that we set up earlier and interact with these particles. It's going to move them. It's actually going to interact like a real bubble would. So everything seems to be working as expected, so we can now move on to the next stage, which is the meshing. So I'm just going to reset to the initial state, and I'm going to go up to mesh, and I'm going to create just a particle mesh. And you'll see that that's in the relationship editor now. So I'll just enlarge the relationship editor so we can see what's going on more clearly. And what we need to do now is just tie all of the emitters to this mesh. So just control click and drag all of the emitters onto this particle mesh, or command click and drag if you're on a Mac. And once they're all tied in, we can go into the parameters of this particle mesh and set this up even further. So we basically want to make it so all these bursts of particles are subtracting from the fill object. So if we select our first circle, we can go into its subtractive field attribute and set this to yes, and we're going to do this to all of the circles. So basically this is telling RealFlow to cut out sort of a space inside the volume of water. Just like a real bubble would do, there'll be empty space where the bubble is. So that's all you've told RealFlow to do. So we're pretty much ready to go now. If you want, you can put a filtering effect on the mesh. It's like a post effect, which sort of makes the mesh look a little bit more dynamic. So I'm just going to hit simulate now, and you'll see the mesh is being generated as we simulate. So this is going to take a while, so I'm going to pause the video now and come back once it's simulated to frame 200. So here we are, the simulation's finished, and as you can see it's meshed it all, and it's looking just like we'd expect. The bubbles are going through the water volume, and they are creating kind of an effect on the top particles. They're sort of dispersing them, and these are actually looking a little bit kind of blobby for my liking, so I'm going to turn the thinning to 0.2 and the relaxation to 0.2 on the filters, and I'll just remesh that frame just to see what it looks like. And that's starting to look a little bit more organic, a little bit more real, if you like. So if you want, you can click build mesh again and remesh this all to the end with the new filter settings. So now it's going to run through and remesh this with the new filter settings. It doesn't take as long as it would do if we were simulating it at the same time, and you'll see that if you go into the meshes folder where you set up your project, you're getting these bin files, and these can be imported to your 3D program as long as you've got the RealFlow importer plugin installed. So you can get this for Maya, 3D Studio Max, Cinema 4D. So there it is, it's remeshed it all, and that just kind of looks a lot better with the filter, I think. So I'm just going to show you inside of Cinema 4D how we can import this. So I'm going to go to my plugins and go to my RealFlow Mesh Importer plugin and go to File Path and just locate these bin files, and you want to select the very first one. So in this case it's 0000.bin and there we go. We've got the mesh inside of RealFlow, free to do whatever you want with it. We can add some lights to this, put some water textures onto it, and we didn't have to do any fancy exporting. All the bin files are just generated there for you in the folder. So once again, thank you for watching. This has been the YellowDog 3D Tips blog. Stay tuned for more 3D tips. Cheers!